Hello and welcome everyone to another Inkarnate live stream. My name is Mati, and today, guess what? We're going to be showing you how to create fantasy world biomes. Let's let people filter in real quick, and we do have an announcement, and I'm excited to tell you about it because it is so awesome. Let people filter in here while I show this announcement. For those of you who are just kicking back, just got off work, taking the shoes off, and you're just logged in, you'll notice in the notification section, click that bell in the top right corner, and you'll see there's some new art that we just released for the fantasy world. Looking awesome. Here is the announcement banner, and you'll see that we've included pictures of the stamps. So some pretty much trees, vegetation, mountains, and cliff stamps, some of which actually have clipping masks, which is going to make blending so much easier with your mountains and your base texture. And of course, this absolutely wonderful map made by our in-house world map czar, Philip. And I'll go ahead and take a closer look at that map so you can kind of see what that kind of looks like. So let's just go ahead and zoom in here real quick. Welcome everybody. Yeah, so take a look at this. Awesome. And no, I spoke with Philip, and it looks like most of these mountains, if not all of them, have the ones with the clipping mask. So you look at the base of these mountains, and they just blend in so well with whatever texture is beneath them, and that is just so freaking nice, so incredibly helpful. Hey, first time chatter dances with owls. You love Inkarnate, so do we. Thanks for joining us. So you can see all the just how beautiful these mountains just blend in so well with these textures, and of course a whole bunch of new trees ranging from cherry trees. We've got some sequoias. I'm seeing bushes. I think I also saw some more autumn or fall trees. I see there's some purplish, so like fay, different types of jungle, even baobab, some savanna trees. So a lot of new trees so that now you can really populate your biomes with the proper vegetation that's needed. So super cool. Definitely check out those things. Now, before we get started, if you want to follow along with today's stream, you're probably going to want to copy we're going to want to clone and edit this link. Oh, it looks like it's already been provided. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cheryl. So go ahead and make sure you clone and edit that map if you want to follow along. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. For those of you who just walked in, welcome. Don't forget, today we are doing Fantasy World Biomes. Hey, first time chat, Sky Kuga, welcome. And hey, Unchain the Phoenix. Yeah. Oh, biomes are very difficult, so I understand. So we're going to go ahead and open up. As I said just a few moments ago, please feel free to clone and edit the map. That link is provided in the chat by Cheryl, our moderator. I'll let you clone and edit that map and get that started here. And then we'll go over this together. And biomes can be extremely challenging. I've always found that doing a biome can be difficult without having some prerequisites first before you get started. All right, so it looks like people are doing another first-time chatter. Awesome. Written Remedy, I love it. Awesome. I'm so glad that you're all here. That is fantastic. I'm just going to go ahead and prep this and get ready to go here. So once you kind of open this up, you'll see that I got the title right here, and we're going to go over some elements on the map, and we'll show you how to get started because with biomes, first you need landmasses. So we'll do a real quick review over landmasses. It's only going to take a few moments, and then we'll jump right into biomes. All right. Okay, so go ahead and turn off that stream title. We don't need it anymore. Now, whenever you're working your world map, of course, one of the first things you're going to want to do is set a grid. Okay, so I go over to my grid, show that grid. All right. Now, I've already set this grid to be 16 by 12. Okay. Now, if you're wanting to make a map and you want to put important lines like the equator and things like that, then you're going to want to make sure that those numbers are even. You notice that I've got 16 and 12. These are even numbers. This way I can do an exact middle line going horizontally that equals the equator. So even numbers work. Sometimes your even numbers won't be scaled properly. The grid might be half off the map or maybe half in the map. So what you do to fix that is just resize it. Set that scale and then resize it to make it to what you want, because sometimes the grid can be confusing at first without understanding how it works. And maybe it'd be a good idea to go over what that does. Now, once you've set your grid, of course, now you can decide to scale. So each one of those grid cells represents a certain measurement, right? So what I'll do is go to scale, pick what kind of scale that I want here. And what I'm working with is 750 square miles per square. Okay, since there's 16 columns that's going across, so you're doing 16 times 750, that's going to be about 12,000 miles. That's about half the circumference of the Earth. So it's a bit smaller. So this is about half the size. So this planet in which our world map is going to be on is about half the size of the Earth. Okay, so always set the grid that you need, and then also set the scale, determining on what each one of those cells represents. Okay, this scale is going to be so helpful for a lot of things. Now, once you've set that scale, you can now go ahead and lay down your lines and labels, because you're going to need to know where the equator is. You're going to need to know where the North and the South Pole is, and you might want to even add in extra lines to know where the snow melt begins, or a thaw. So I've added some extra lines at the bottom, just below and above the North and South Poles. This kind of allows show me where the snow, wherever land I'm adding, I'll know that this is where the snow is going to be melting. So it's kind of a good place to add. All right, so now that we've added in our lines and labels, it's nice to put in some land masses. Now with land masses, I always recommend that you start with your North and your South Poles. This is because it will be easier for you to determine how big your land masses are in the middle, in between the North and the South Pole. So it gives you a little bit of a border in the North and the South of your map, and it kind of gives you some limits on how big your continents can be. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my foreground layer so you can see the landmass that I have here. So I started with the North Pole and the South Pole first, and then I expanded outward, kind of creating large globular shapes with a larger brush, and then I fine-tuned sculpt with a smaller brush with the subtract mode and kind of carved it out. Think of it as a sculpture. When you first start with a stone sculpture or a wood sculpture, you visualize the overall shape as you're hacking away at it, right? Once you get into the overall definition or the shape, you can start adding in more definition, more details. Carve out your bays, your peninsulas, your isthmuses, anything like that, horns. There are so many different types of land formations that it's extremely interesting. So research that, and so you'll be surprised how much you can actually work with there. So once I've added all the land masses, I also went ahead and color coded, or at least put down some textures to give me a general idea of what each biome might be. So if I go over to my biome group, I'm going to open that up, and you'll see that you'll see in that top left corner, there's a key right there. And that key kind of tells me or gives me a general idea of where my biomes are. Now, for a lot of biomes, it's nice to know where they are in relation to the equator. So if you're not certain where maybe to put your deserts, then you can always remember that where the equator, in that middle line, that's where a lot of your subtropical deserts are going to be. And there's a lot of different types of deserts too, by the way. There's arid and dry, there's coastal, and I think we see what the other two are. There's also a cold and semi-arid, hot, dry, coastal, and cold. Okay, so looks like here, without mountain ranges, it's hard to know which one they'll be. So we'll be adding down mountain ranges, and that will absolutely help too to know where your biomes would be. Mountains are so large that they create their own weather. So it's super important to always mark down where your mountains are. If you have a hard time with that, you can use either some kind of guide using plate tectonics, or you can just use your imagination. It's up to you and how much research and effort you want to put into it. I went ahead and just kind of used the borders of my biomes. That means wherever two biomes connected is where I kind of put my mountains. So I'll go to my mountains real quick and I'll place it down, and you'll notice there's some white lines there. I use these white lines as to kind of represent where my mountain ranges are going to be. And I put some along right above the coastlines, of course, right of where the deserts are in the center, because you're trying to cut off some of the cool air or some of the air that goes to that desert. So if you want a more arid area, make sure to throw in a mountain range. It looks like these two deserts here in the center are coastal deserts. So we might be going with that. So what I'll do now, once I've set down my scale, my grid, my labels, I've done all the different labeling of my biomes and stuff like that, I can start throwing down some stamps. So what I'll do first is kind of take all of these. I'll take my mountains and my biomes, and I'm going to drop the opacity down just a bit so that I can make sure that when I'm throwing down those stamps, they're not getting in the way. So I've dropped that down. Now in the last stream, I mentioned the importance of groups, and that's how I'm accomplishing a lot of what you're seeing here in the stream. Groups are a great way to organize your map, and that means less work for you hunting down, looking for things and placements. So if you haven't seen that stream that last stream, which was understanding groups, go check that out, okay? All right, let's go ahead and zoom in and take a look at what we have. First, I'm going to go into that catalog, and I want you to know first that there are 2 stamps that have the clipping masks. That's going to be your mountains dark and your mountains light. Those 2 are going to have the clipping masks. All these other mountains, newer mountains right here, do not have those clipping masks. So if you want to make your life easier, feel free to use the clipping masks, and that way it'll pick up whatever texture is beneath them. And then you'll notice that that's going to be very helpful, considering I've already thrown down some base textures to kind of represent the area or volume of my biomes. Now right here, we're set to about 100% scale right here. And I want you to take a look at it at 100% so you can kind of see what it looks like. I'll put down just a couple so you can kind of see what they look like, because we're probably going to drop the scale down. At 100%, these are quite large, rather massive mountains. We don't need them to be that big. So go ahead and take a look at them. As I move them around, you'll notice that they're picking up the texture that is behind them. So you got some orange, some desert, some green, and you got some in the gray here. So in other words, what's happening is that the clipping mask is doing the work for you and just picking up the texture that's on the FG layer. That's just anything made with the add mode of the mask tool. So if you end up painting the FG layer with a color and you put this stamp with a clipping mask over it, it's going to pick up whatever's on the FG layer, whatever texture, okay? Now that I've done that, I can probably set my scale. There's no need to have a mountain that's almost about 600 miles wide. That's quite massive. So what we might want to do instead is probably drop the scale down. So I'll just hold down the Shift T, my scroll mouse wheel, and bring them down. I think about 50% should be pretty good. Those are really small, but I want to make sure there's enough room to fit forests, lakes, rivers, anything else that I want to put down. So sometimes it's important to make sure that you got the scale right for your mountains. And when you put down mountains, know that that's going to be the main stamp that's going to determine basically the scale in which all other stamps are going to be, right? So you'll be able to scale the tree to the mountain, you'll be able to scale a road to the mountain, scale whatever it is you were putting down to that mountain. So think of your mountain as the ultimate reference for scale for the rest of the stamps that you put down. So I'll go ahead and just when I'm doing a mountain range, and the reason why I'm putting a mountain range here is because this is where my deserts are. And so I want to make sure that that mountain range is kind of blocking the flow of air and kind of making it more arid, all right, along this coastal desert. That's why I'm doing this. So first, let's go ahead and put down a couple. When you're putting down mountain ranges, just click, hold, and drag. Don't worry about changing, maneuvering anything. Just put the stamps down first in your row. Once you've put it down, I always like to zoom in and just make sure that I didn't accidentally perhaps have a stamp going off the map a little bit. Okay, so always go in. Best to do it right away with your first pass of your mountains, because then you'll probably forget and it might get lost in the thousands of stamps you're going to be placing after this. Because believe me, a world map is very busy. You're going to find a lot of stamps on it. So when you first do that first drag, for that first main range, you're going to want to click, hold, drag, and then you'll go ahead and review it and make sure that none of those stamps are bleeding off onto the BG layer. Hey, Frosted Berry, first time chatter, glad that you are here. Hey, Spider Cat, thank you so much. All right, awesome. So check that out. So we put those mountains together. Let's just keep going. It looks like I've got some mountain ranges here, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll through the mountains and maybe place some individually because it's a tighter space. So when it comes to a smaller space like this, sometimes it's nice to actually scroll through the set and place it down instead of just placing it randomly, because it might go over. Because if I had followed just click, hold, and scroll, I probably would have gotten a larger mountain and it would have bled over. So when it comes to the end of your mountain ranges, it's always nice to go use them, use a particular stamp. And I also like to sometimes bring the size down at the end. So the mountain ranges are a bit bigger in the center and then kind of thin out as they go towards the end. That's just what I like to do. That's an aesthetic thing. I'm not sure how that fits into the science-wise, but me personally, I like that. Let's go ahead and put down more of these mountains here, and we'll just do this with the desert. Keep going across. And you'll notice right away that I allowed the stamp to go over a little bit right there, see? And so I just carefully place that back. And go ahead and move that there. And sometimes I like to maneuver things around. There we go, let's do that. Make sure that it looks good. There's one, and let's add another one. Let's switch, not have it be the same one. Click, hold, drag. Okay. And of course, you go over a little bit, that's okay. Just go back in. Okay, so mountain ranges are important to the desert biome, right? Because what is causing the lack of moisture? What is causing the lack of rainfall to go to the desert, right? It's because there are probably mountains getting in the way. So having a mountain range bordering along your desert is a way to show that not much moisture is able to get to those areas. So it's nice to add that in. And I might even want to delete one of these ranges right here to make it look like there's a pass to maybe get through here. So a mountain pass. If you're wondering how to make a mountain pass, just delete one and then you have a nice pass right here going right into that desert. Awesome. All right, let's take a look at where we're at. That looks good. Now some other things that you find in a desert might be some rolling hills, and also maybe some rolling hills that are a mix between dirt and sand, and then moving out towards the desert as it just goes more and more into sand. So let's talk about transition. Whenever you have mountain ranges, how is it that you transition the mountain range into that biome that it's adjacent or connected to, right? Sometimes it's nice to throw down foothills. And foothills can be simple. You can either scale down, bring down the size of the mountains to a really small size and just kind of pretend that they're kind of a smaller variation. That's one way to go about doing it. Lots of different ways to go about it. I do like variation in size of mountains, and it works well with having some transition between whatever the texture is you're using, especially with these clipping mats. Super nice. So I'll throw in a couple more of these small ones. There we go. So you don't have to throw in, don't have to always throw in foothills to every mountain range, though it is nice to have them. So for this one, I won't use the hill stamps. I'll just keep using these mountain ones for now, so that's good. Next step is to throw in, of course, I would probably suspect some dunes, right? Now, of course, when you think about scale, these dunes are going to be so incredibly small that at this distance, you likely will not be able to see individual dunes. And that's okay. This is a map. It's a representation of reality. It's okay if some things are off scale, all right? Don't beat yourself up over it. So if you do want to show a visualization showing dunes, even though dunes in real life at this scale would probably be not noticeable, all right? And that's okay. So let's go ahead and throw in some dunes here. Now let's go ahead and put one down for now, and let me check where I am on scale. I've got these larger mountains at 50. I'm going to go ahead and see just what this looks like at 50, and it kind of almost looks like a mountain, right? So that's not going to work. So let's actually go back to the original scale, and I kind of like that. That's kind of small. Maybe we can even throw in some longer ones. Let's go ahead and zoom in and take a look at the different kinds of dunes that we have. Always nice to take a look at our options. Let's check out this color right here. I think this is about the right size. We'll go about 20, I think, or maybe even 15. And if you'll notice right away that the texture doesn't really match with the stamp, don't worry about that. If you've got Pro and you're putting down this kind of stuff, one of the things you can do is blend modes. And an absolute wonderful blend mode to use is luminosity. And the reason why I recommend this is because sometimes you don't want to go through the catalog and look for 20 different textures to find the texture that matches the base of the stamp you're trying to blend with. So instead, think smarter, work smarter, not harder. Go ahead and use that luminosity blend mode on that stamp, and it will pick up the color beneath it. See what happens when I put it on the ocean? It picks up that blue color. See what happens when I put it here in the orange? It picks up that color. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So kind of helpful. Now there are a couple ways that you can go about doing terrain. It can be a mix of stamps and textures. Let's just put down a couple dunes for now. We're going to set it to random stamp, and I obviously want to set it to luminosity. And I'm just going to place a couple randos around like this, and we can change things as we go. Also, don't forget to make sure that to overlap. So you notice right here, I'm going to put this dune right behind this mountain. That's called overlap. Overlapping is extremely helpful when you're trying to create depth. So I'm putting down these dunes, and I'm putting them both in front of and behind some mountains, so that way it has that perception of depth. That's really nice. We want to have a little bit of that depth. So let's put in some dunes. Okay. Now I'm going to look carefully at these dunes, and let's look at that size. Let's take a step out. I'm also going to turn off my guidelines as well, so that that isn't in the way. So let's go ahead and bring it down. There we go. Guidelines gone. And let's remove our biome information as well. There we go. Now you can kind of take a look at all this stuff without any of the paths being in the way. There we go. Now you have a better look at what we're working with here. Nice. All right. Let's take a step back in. Yeah, I like this. See, look at this. See, these clipping masks really, really help to make sure that that texture really, really pops. And I really, really like that. So I'm really glad that we added in those clipping masks. So praise to the artists. All right. Now, some other things that you might want to consider doing is if you're not happy with the way that the dunes, let's say they don't match with the texture beneath, right? Maybe I want to drop the contrast a bit to remove some of those line work, which might cause it to, or let's bring it down, and then I'll bring the brightness up. Oopsie, not too much. There we go. That looks about good. Maybe bring the contrast down a little bit more. There we go. So you can change things in HSBC to make your stamps fit more with your texture. I think that's a little bit less work than trying to search through and try to find the right texture. So always remember the luminosity blend mode. That will be a great help to you to speed up your process, and you'll spend a lot less time trying to make sure that your textures match in. Okay. All right, I'm going to throw in just a couple more rando dunes here, copy paste. And what might not be a bad idea is to maybe even consider adding in an oasis. Obviously at this scale, an oasis is going to be absolutely tiny. You probably wouldn't even be able to see it at this view, but if you wanted to make sure that it was important, maybe there's an oasis in your desert and it's important to you and you want to have it on the map, you can totally do that. My recommendation would be to use like the path tool instead of a texture. And the reason why I recommend making an oasis or even kind of bodies of water, even a lake, is that you can actually move the path around. So as always, you put down a path first. Once it's down, you can go ahead now and select it. Just press that V key to go to select tool. Let's go ahead and turn off that path. Shadow, no shadow. Let's change that color to some kind of blue. I think might be good. Oopsie, sorry, color. There we go. Oh, there we go. Greenish, maybe blue. Greenish blue, I think. Might look good. Maybe more on the blue side. Let's keep going. There we go. Perfect. So now that I've got that set, I also might want to consider changing the blend mode. And the blend mode is nice because you'll pick up some of the texture that's underneath of it, so that depending on the blend mode that you use. One thing you can use is just color, and what that will do is it will retain all of the contrasting information of the texture beneath it, but at the same time it will also change the color to that blue color. So that's one way that you can go about doing it. Maybe we can nestle it in. Let's say you want it to be small, really, really small. You can go in and just put it right here, maybe up against the dune. And I also recommend just putting maybe a little bit of green or something around the edge, or make the object shadow green. So you could do that as well. If you wanted to create this illusion of some grass, so go to shadow, type in your green shadow here. We'll go with this one, might work, maybe even a darker one. Shadow blur, and we'll increase the intensity. Let's go ahead and zoom in and just see how it looks first. There we go. I can't really, oh, I think it's set to color, so that might not work. Let's try green. Oh, I see a little bit of it. Let me bring the intensity up. There we go. I can see just a little bit of green there. Perfect. So now you got that, right? And of course, if you got an oasis, you're probably going to want some palm trees. So let's go in here, check out what we've got for some new stuff. You've got palm trees right here. Got some desert plants here. Might even be a good idea to throw some of that in. You've got a baobab tree here, a savanna tree. And I think a palm tree might be a good idea. So let's throw in a couple. Now I'm going to remember the scale of this tree because other trees are going to be similar to that scale. Okay, so just kind of remember that. So let's go ahead and maybe push this up to 14, make it just slightly bigger. There we go. And I'll just put a couple lining along the edge here. I'm going to overlap. So I'll put a couple in front of the oasis as well. There you go. So now you have this kind of nice oasis here. Okay, let's go ahead and select this. Let's take a step back and see how it looks. There's your oasis. Small, simple, totally out of scale, but some of you might want that to be there, right? So if this is about biomes, right? Now we might want to also consider throwing in some other vegetation as well, like cacti and stuff like that, or we can throw that in another desert if you want. So we've got dunes here, we've got our mountain ranges, and we've got an oasis. I think these work pretty good. Yeah, the new mountains are absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love them. So we can consider maybe doing another desert and another stream. Now, if people end up liking this stream, they like the direction it's going in, we can turn this into a series. So there'll be a part 2, part 3, part 4, if you're wanting to see all the different biomes be put on here. So we've got desert down, and I'm thinking I might throw in another one, which would be really fun, which would likely be maybe a coniferous forest or what's often called a taiga. Okay, it's only going to have what's called coniferous trees or conifers, which are basically pine needles, things that don't have leaves. They have pine cones, they have pine needles, they don't shed in the winter, they store a lot of water in these little tiny pine needles, and the pine cones are a seed basically. So you would find that basically in your taiga. Now I can go back to my groups, of course, and we'll go back to my biomes. I'm just going to shoot this back up again so I kind of have an idea of where my things are. And I'm at 104 changes, so I think I will save. Now while that saves, I'll go over the guide here and take a look at what else we might want to consider having here. Now that brown area equals a deciduous, or I'm sorry, that's a deciduous forest. So that would be with deciduous trees and not conifers. The taiga is that dark green. So let's go ahead and make that taiga. And that's going to be in that kind of darker green path that you see right behind the save. Prompt. All right. I generally like to save about 100 changes or so. Obviously, you can get carried away and thousands of changes can take place. But if you are paying attention, it's always nice to save after a certain number of changes, okay? So let's take a look here. So it looks like that dark green is going to be my taiga or a coniferous forest. Again, conifer trees, and we've totally got those. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go back to my biomes. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. Don't need it no more. I know which one is my taiga. Let's go into our stamps. Go into the catalog here, and you're going to notice there are a lot of different coniferous trees that you can use. Let's use the new ones here that we have. This one right here, an evergreen. These are absolutely beautiful, so let's use these. And maybe even a mix of a couple might be a good idea, but for now, let's use these evergreens. Let's go ahead and zoom in and see where they are in scale. Evergreens are pretty big. Let's put that right next to it and just see how big that is. That looks pretty big. About that size is good. It's all right if you want to scale to be a little off. If you want to portray a forest, if you want to have a little more detail with maybe an individual tree, you can scale up a little bit. It's up to you. So that's all about your discretion, how realistic you want your map to be. Do you want it to be an exaggerated scale with very visible points of interest and landmasses that are very visible? That's up to you. So now that I've got that trees down, it's nice to go into, I've collected this, it's nice to go into my area, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm trying to cover a rather large area with this. So we'll cover this green area. So what I'm going to use is use the area brush. This is just the size of the area that's going to fill with the trees. Next to it, you'll see that density. This is called placement density. That just means how densely compact those stamps are going to be together. All right, so what I like to do first is to create basically the heart or the wood or the deep of the wood, meaning just this is where you're going to have the least amount of light because it's such a dense canopy. So I'm not going to go to the edge. I'm just going to make a couple areas where you have some very dense forest-like area. So we'll put one there. Let's put one maybe like this. Okay, might be a little slow. Okay, put these together. And what I'm doing is just kind of creating these little kind of islands where this biome is the most dense, or these forests are most dense. Then we'll go back with that density brush and we'll leave the area alone, but we'll change the density. Okay, because what's really difficult about making a forest is making sure that there's a transition between the forest, the tree line, and how it kind of disperses a little bit, and then into the thicker part of the wood, like the heart of the wood, or whichever term you want to use, the interior if you wish. And we'll add a much larger one over here. So this taiga is massive. There's a lot going on here. Kind of a large taiga. Okay, we'll put these down. Now you are putting down, now even though there's only 10 changes, there's still quite a bit of things happening with this. So I do recommend probably after using the density brush that you do probably save your changes just to be safe, because you are, even though it's showing 20 changes, you're still putting down a ton of stamps, which puts a little bit of stress on your machine. So I would totally recommend that after placing these down that you probably save. Okay, that's just what happens when you're using the density brush, okay? All right, sweet, we'll let that save. All right. All right, we're gonna let this save, and then I'm gonna show you the next transition. Forests, I use a series of different densities. As I go further and further away from the heart or the interior of the forest, I like to then drop the density and make the trees start to filter out, okay? And it's always going to be a little more work than just drop the density brush and then boom, your forest is done. If you want more authentic forests, if you want them to look more natural, then of course it's going to take more than just one click and drag and hold of the density brush. You're going to have to do a little bit of work, but with the density brush, it makes the interior parts much easier. So now I'm going to drop the density down to about 60%. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to single click or just drag around. All right, you're starting to see the transition begin to occur when you have a little bit of forests on the outside. And of course, we're going to have to do a little bit more work. You'll notice that it's quite dense right there, and you can see that very clearly. It's okay, you go in and we'll change up to make the transition better. But already we're in a good position here. So we'll go ahead and with a lighter density, go around these edges. I'm going to do single clicks for now because it just causes less lag. And a lot of that's just because the editing resolution I'm in, which is 3K, to kind of make those stamps look a little bit nicer. You can see what we're working with here. And of course, I'm running a OBS, which is an open broadcasting program for streaming. So of course, it's going to cause a little bit of lag. You might not experience this yourself, just depending on the machine and the specs of the device that you're using, all right? Okay, so you'll see there now that I've added that. So the next step is to bring the density down even more, okay? You can start dragging in, start connecting some of these, put them on the edges here. Now, because the density is so much lower, you'll notice that there's not nearly as much lag, okay? So that really helps. On here, put them in here. There we go. So the thing that I like to do to help with this transition, you'll notice here, you can kind of noticeably see some of the transition there, and that might not look right. You don't really care for that, right? So the way that you go about fixing that is you're probably going to use individual trees. And so what you're going to do is go back to your density brush, just go back to 100 and put the area back to 0, okay? 0 just means individual. And what you'll do is just kind of go where those areas are, where you see the line, and just single click, tap, 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 kind of break up that line. All right, just tap, tap, tap. You'll notice that that now has kind of works a little better there. Let's look at this tree line. Let's look at this tree line. Fix this. There we go. And one other thing you're also going to notice is that trees also like to go into clusters. One thing you'll notice about the edgy, or not the edgy, but the one thing you'll notice about the density brush at the lower densities is that they are kind of almost equidistant from each other, and that's very, very unnatural. So you will have to go in with some single clicks. This is just if you want more natural forests. You'll have to go in with some single clicks and cluster some trees together, because you wouldn't find individual trees perfectly planted equidistant from each other as if it was like a Forest Service project where they had planted some trees, timber companies go in and bring that down, and then the Forest Service replants those trees, right? And they're pretty equidistant from each other, right? We're not doing that here. You want a more natural look. Of course, you're going to have to go in and do some single clicks. Now, this is just up to you and how much detail you want to have for your forests. If you like more details, you want it to be more realistic, expect more human hours you're going to have to put into it, okay? Unless you're inhuman and you can you can make maps in incredible speeds. How do they do that? So single clicks are kind of a way to kind of help you out. All right, so I'll just do some rings around here with some single clicks. And you'll notice I'm doing a lot of changes, 353 changes. Sound the alarm, scary, right? Now I'm going to go in and single click some groups, so where I put a couple trees together. If you want, you can go to area and just switch to an area of 2 and just click, click, click like this, and you will be kind of creating some of these clusters, which are kind of nice, because you're going to see that happens a lot, especially in savannas. In a savanna, mostly flat, but you will find clusters of trees, right? So it's always nice to just drop down the size a little bit, and you can also just bring the density down if you feel like the clusters are too thick. All right, bring it down. Let me just take a look. You'll see a preview, and you just click like this, and you'll see that there's some nice clusters there, nothing too crazy. And you can always put single clicks next to those clusters too if they're just too uniform. So that's the trick to break up the uniformity that the density brush creates with those equidistant trees. Is just put in some single clicks around there, some single trees to give it a more natural spread, okay? All right, now I'm really pushing those saves. I know, right? Better save it at 425 changes, my. Yep, I'm pushing the envelope. Naughty, naughty. Watch the whole thing just crash because of that, right? Okay. All right. I'm gonna let this save, and then we'll go ahead and add in a couple things into our Taiga biomes. Maybe we want to throw in a lake or a river, or we want to maybe a lake, maybe like a deep forest lake might be kind of cool or interesting. So you could do that, and again, just use that the path tool to make that. And so what I'll do is I'll cut out a section of the forest, because the only reason why you wouldn't see trees in maybe a forest of this density is because there's a mountain there, some tall hills, maybe some rock formation. There's a lake, right? Trees aren't going to grow, large conifers aren't going to be growing out of the middle of the lake, right? That's probably not going to work. So we'll let this save. It's going to go in a little bit slow because I did a lot of changes. And of course, I'm running the software and I'm in 3K. We'll let this save, and then I'll show you how to make that lake. It's the same thing with the Oasis. Use the path tool, and you can use those shadows to make a transition between the water parts and, of course, the shoreline. So that means you could make the path blue color and then throw in a yellow shadow to show that there's maybe a little bit of sand along that shore. So we'll show you how to do that. Things are going a little slow. I wonder if something is happening here. All right. Awesome. So glad that you are all here. There we go. Hey, things are happening. I was going to take a little power nap, but you know. All right, 40 minutes. Got 20 minutes left in this stream. Sweet. Definitely let me know, or if you have already, that's okay. But let me know if you would like to see this as a series, okay? So the way that I would go about kind of doing this is you want to pick an area where you want maybe a lake to be. You look at these, you got some 3 really just massive forests here, and maybe it's just some little spots right here for players to walk through. But let's say that you wanted to throw a lake in, all right? And what you're going to do is you'll probably select in a couple of these like this. Just select them and then just press that delete key. Now it's going to look weird at first because it's going to look like it's a square, like someone just did a bikini wax or something. So don't mind that. We're going to fix that. All right. We're going to fix that. Never mind that. I promise you we'll take care of that. All right. Oh, awesome. Well, written remedy. I like to hear that. Good. A series sounds like a great idea. Okay. So now I've created this open space, right? Let me go back. I'm just going to give myself less work, and I'll just select that path right there that I have. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it. I'm going to bring it up here. And I'm just going to scale it up and make it a little bit bigger. In fact, I'm going to do a little bit of extra work and change some things around. Let's maybe give it kind of a sand, like, let's add in some yellow there. Let's go ahead and put in the intensity and bring the blur down. There we go. All right, let's try that. There we go. So it gives it some yellow feel to it. And I might even want to change the color to maybe a darker kind of a blue. There we go. And I'll change the shape. Now that I've edited that, I can go back in. And let's kind of make like an oblong, kind of an odd shape like this. There we go. There we go. So now you have that lake. Now, of course, you're going to want to make sure that the path is below the trees because you want some trees to overlap. So let me grab one of these trees. And remember that big trick, overlap is the key. Overlapping is the key. Let's put the area and the density back to normal. Let's put a couple trees overlapping this lake, okay? So that way it kind of looks nice, right? And you see there's a little bit of yellow in there to kind of represent a shoreline. And of course it's set to that color blend mode. So it's picking up whatever that texture is beneath it. So that's kind of nice. So there you go. So now you have an easy lake right there in that taiga that you've got there. It's relatively a large lake, but at least it's there and you can see it. So if your players want to travel through a dense taiga to get to this kind of mysterious, foggy lake where they have to, I don't know, fight Loch Ness or something, it's up to you, right? So it's always nice to kind of add that stuff in there. All right, let's take a look here. Nice. So that looks good. And of course, you can always throw in lakes, throw in rivers and stuff if you want. Let's go do a couple more biomes. We did this large taiga right here. We can change things around, make things different if you want, but that's basically the gist of forests, and different forests are going to look a little bit different. It's not always going to be massively dense or very, very dense. Let's go ahead and take a step back. I'm not going to do any saves because we've done so much there. I am going to go back down to my biome list. See, it's always useful to have this kind of information on the map at hand so that way you kind of remember what things are, okay? Just remember, group everything. You can group paths, you can group clipping masks, stamps, text, lots of things that you can group. So kind of use that to your advantage to kind of help you out. So if you ever get lost. So now we can go ahead and zoom back into our key here. We've done so far desert, we've got an oasis, some dunes in here. We created a mountain range here that also affects this one, this other desert right here. We've got a savanna in between the taiga. We've got this deciduous forest here. And I think we've got also, what is this blue here? This is a tundra. You know what? Let's do a tundra. Let's just keep traveling north and get closer to the North Pole. Okay, great thing about a taiga is that taigas don't, or not a taiga, but a tundra doesn't have a lot of trees. And there's a particular reason why tundras don't have a lot of trees. And it's mostly because there's a permafrost. So which means the soil there stays kind of frozen all the time, or just pretty much all year round. And that permafrost prevents rain from draining, which is how small plants survive basically in taigas, but not trees, because there's just not enough. The ground is permanently frosted over. So the way that you would show a taiga is it would include snow, but also have some greenery in it. Now, when you're going with textures, I can tell you right now that you can also use textures from various styles. So there's a really great texture that I like, and I believe it is in Fantasy or Watercolor Cities. And the reason why I'm choosing Watercolor Cities is because Watercolor Cities is set to a very, very small scale, considering how the distance that you're looking at. So it's kind of the perfect thing to perfect one to choose. So you'll notice here that you've got some light snow with some green here. This might actually work quite well for our taiga. And now I know you're going to say, well, that's not a fantasy world texture. I know, but that's okay, because you can mix and match textures just depending on the scale and how you blend them with the other textures that are not from that style. Okay, so always just remember that you can use different types of textures from different styles. Just be smart when you use them, because you will find some contrast or some contradictions when using the different kinds of textures, because some of them don't blend well together. That might depend on the way that they're rendered, the scale they're rendered at, the line thickness, stuff like that. Now, because this is such a small map, I might want to consider resizing it. You'll notice right away at 100% that it's quite large, and we don't need it to be that big. So we'll go in and scale it down. Now, of course, remember that when you're scaling down a texture, you're revealing a lot of the repetitive artifacts that are on the texture. Now, there are a couple of ways to mitigate or negate that, and that is to rotate. Rotating is helpful. And of course, do not set it to 100% opacity when you apply it. Set it to a lower opacity. So think of it as painting. When you're painting something, you have multiple strokes that you put the brush to the canvas. It's that same concept when you're painting your map, right? You're going to do several strokes. You're probably never going to get one single stroke of a texture that's going to get what you want. So it's going to do a little bit of work. So let me go ahead and apply that texture. Let me just do one coat. Let me go right over it. In fact, it could be a little more than that. Let's go to 42 and just see what it looks like. There we go. I think that looks okay. And we'll just go all the way, just cover the whole thing for now. So you got some greens in there, and you got some snow in there, as you would kind of expect, because there is ground cover. There is some small plants that survive in a tundra, but trees don't grow there, right? So just remember that piece, okay? Now, the closer that I get to the snow line, or where that North Pole is, I might want to consider start fading out some of that green area and put in some snow. So of course, I might want to consider using maybe one of this snow texture. I could use one of these snow textures, or just even use a snow alpha. There's a snow alpha texture here. That could be useful. Let's try bringing up the opacity and just apply some of that. Let's bring it up even more. Bring it up quite a bit. 100% should be just fine. There we go. Go and put that right up. That way you get some more brighter snow color in a transition. There we go. So we got some snow in here, and I'll even throw in a little bit more. There we go. So that way I don't have too much green or too much white. There we go. Okay. So you'll see that there is some snow, just some light snow or some freezing here, not too much. And I'll go ahead and take a greener texture, of course, and blend further upward to kind of blend that biome. So I'll go ahead and up in here, throw in this green like this. Here, let's put it all along here. And of course, you can always do single clicks to create transition. What you're doing, single clicks, when you're doing texturing, all it does is just blend the two textures that you're in between, that you're working with. So if I just do these single clicks, I'm kind of causing some of the texture from the biome below to slowly bleed in to the biome above. Okay. All right, sweet. This is looking good so far. I'm quite okay with things. Yep, absolutely. To make a map look big, you need to use smaller assets. Absolutely. And you know, the best way to do that is just to resize your map, because when you use the resize feature, it will scale the stamps down. It doesn't actually change the size of the canvas. So it's so much easier for you just to resize your map if you want it to be bigger. That's it. Use that and it will change the scale of the stamps. It's a quick way to make sure all your stamps are scaled around the same. And that way you don't have to go in and resize everything, make a new landmass and all that stuff. That's not necessary. You don't need to do all that work. Just use the resize feature. If you don't know where that is, you'll find it right here in the grid, resize map, new map from region, or just go into that hamburger menu in the top left-hand corner and you'll notice resize map, new map from region, okay? So it's just kind of a quick and easy way. So now we've kind of done that. There's not a whole lot going on here. There's not much that I need to put in the Tundra, because it's mostly textures at the scale. You're not going to see individual bushes, though if you really wanted to, you absolutely could. So let's maybe do that. Let's check out our bushes here. I see some ones here. There's some nice ones right here. Green bushes. Let's do that. That sounds good. So these are really, really small, but that is okay. And the way that I would do it is I would just cluster them in the areas where you see green patches. Don't put them on the snow area, put them in the green patches. So I personally like to do my little rule of 3, where I just put 3 side together like that, makes a little triangle, and it's a nice way to kind of throw in vegetation that looks kind of natural, because bushes are going to grow in clusters. A lot of bushes will, obviously not all of them, but if you throw in just a couple, especially that little rule of 3 thing that I like to do there, kind of helps out. So I'll throw in a couple here. Don't forget to do some singles. And what this kind of represents is just the shrubs that are in that tundra. Remember, no trees. The permafrost on the ground doesn't allow for trees to grow. So those only small shrubs and bushes really kind of grow here. There you go. And what's also nice to do, of course, is to go in and take a couple more of these trees right here, and maybe from our biome below, from our taiga, and just have them kind of bleed off into the lower part of the tundra. Obviously, the farther north you go, there's going to be more of that permafrost, so less chance of any trees growing. So just really, it's going to be on the periphery of this taiga. All right, don't put any trees any further, probably any further up than right there. Wouldn't go any further than that. All right, maybe throw in just one rando tree if you want to, just to make it show that you're kind of transitioning up into the taiga. Oh, I'm sorry, the tundra. My mistake. All right, sweet. All right, let's take a step back. I'm gonna check my time here, 53. Sweet, we've done 3 biomes already. We've done that nice tundra there. We've done our taiga, and we've also done our desert. So we're pretty much reaching the end. Let me go ahead and remove all the information on the map so that I can take a look and just see how it looks without all that distraction, all that busyness. We'll turn off the biomes. That disappears. And this kind of gives you a nice look at the more transitioning. So you'll notice that because I did do the transitioning between the taiga and the tundra, it looks a little more natural, right? You see how I did the single clicks? That broke up that green line. You can see there's a green line at the bottom below that lake. In that taiga, you'll see there's that brown line. It's just straight. So those single clicks are going to be very, very helpful for blending between 2 biomes, okay? All right, well, I don't think I'm going to work on another one, except for maybe, you know what, let's real quick do a Fae, because I do think there is a Fae island right here. This is very small, so that's perfect. We'll just do a small one. Now, when it comes to Fae, it's not really natural into the real world. So it's okay to not actually follow any particular kind of, there's no real right or wrong way really to kind of do Fae. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and scale up a mountain, and it's nice to throw in because what's associated with Fae is kind of, it's overrun by nature. There's not much for civilization, shall we say. The majority of it makes it look like it's just been taken over by nature, really. And at least that's the way I kind of perceive Fae. Obviously, it might be different for different people, but that's the way that I kind of perceive it. So I'll throw in kind of a nice mountain here, kind of position it properly. Don't forget to overlap. I absolutely, like I said before, make sure those mountains overlap. Have them go point. Look carefully here. You'll see the top of this mountain right here is overlapping the actual top of the island, and that's super duper important for when you want to create depth, right? Overlap, stacking things on top of each other is the best way to create depth, right? It's super important. So let's go back into that catalog and check out our options for Fae trees. I saw some purples. So you've got this kind of pointy Fae tree and a more floofy. Now, I don't know about you, but I love me some floofy Fae trees because I'm just floofy that way, I guess. But I love me some floofy trees. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I scale it right. It's okay to make the trees in this one, I think, just a teeny bit bigger. When I think of the Fae, I think big, I think overwhelming, I think just things have grown larger. So I will increase the size of the tree by maybe a 10 points or so. Just make it a little bit bigger, because what I want to do is just kind of create this sense of things just grow bigger here, right? Like as if it was the old growth forest before the Industrial Revolution, right? So I'll throw down some trees, and it's always nice to throw a forest at the base of your mountains. And that can also include Fae. If you throw a nice, beautiful forest, and the reason why a lot of forests form at the base of mountains is because that is where water sources, such as headwaters from rivers, a headwater is just the source where accumulative rainfall and snow melt accumulates in the mountains, and they call what's called your headwaters, okay? So that's where it starts, and it goes down the mountains, and then it goes to more level land and out to sea, okay? So it's always nice to throw in trees at the base of your mountains, because you're going to have a lot of rivers and a lot of water sources coming down from those rivers, giving trees plenty of water to survive. So it's always nice to throw in just a couple. Now this is a really small island. I don't have to throw in a lot. And just for some variation, I think I'll throw in some smaller ones. So sometimes I like to do this. There's always a variety in nature. So whatever forest you're working on, whether it's coniferous, deciduous, savanna trees, whatever, baobabs, it's nice to have some variation. So I'll throw in, I bring the scale down and just throw down some smaller trees to give it more variation. And that is what pretty much defines a lot of nature, is there is so much variety, so much variation in nature. So to show that or represent that on your map, change the scale of trees. Obviously not so much to where a tree is the size of a mountain, unless it's a world tree like Yggdrasil or whatever, that's fine. But keeping them within maybe a 10 to 20 point scale, whether it's larger or smaller, is a good idea. That will again create variety and therefore more natural look, okay? So I've done all that stuff, and I don't know if there's anything else that I really need to add into Fae. I could really just put in a heck of a lot more trees, and I think I will. I think I'll use this other tree, and I'm going to actually do something fun and kind of interesting. I'm going to just go into my filters and just increase the brightness of this tree just a little bit more, because I want it to pop out from these other trees, okay? So I'll throw in these lighter trees, and I'm just making them lighter because I just want some variation and I want to create some contrast. So just brightening those Fae trees just a little bit kind of adds a little bit more variation to it, and I think that really makes it look nice. And you can even throw in just a whole forest segments or just little forest areas like this. along the coast here, maybe some here. And if you really want, you can throw some going up the mountain. Now, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to make sure that you put a tree a layer above wherever the mountain is. And this way, if you want some trees climbing up your mountain, you can. So some trees will climb up a mountain depending on the degree in which it's on. So make sure that you put it up a layer, and then you can throw some nice trees that are kind of growing just along the more shallower or the not as steeper parts of the mountain. And it always looks nice, gives it a little more transition too. So you can always do that. And it doesn't have to be fey. You can do that with any forest that you want. It doesn't matter, okay? So we are at 1 hour. We're 1 hour in. I'm going to go ahead and save at 307 changes. We've done quite a bit here. We explained pretty much where the start is. We added a lot of groups in here. At the bottom, you'll notice that we did quite a bit of trees as I try to go down the object list. But I had all my different biomes, the lines and labels, and my mountain markings. And all these things are going to be helpful to you because, you know, the hardest part with this map process is just knowing where to start. So make sure that you have a process that works for you. My process is just one way. There are dozens of different ways to do it. We have a lot of talented mappers or cartographers in our community, and they all have different ways that they go about with their process. So this is not the only way. It's not even the best way. It's just one way to go about making your biomes. If you want to know how people make their maps, you can always go onto the explore page. If their map is clonable, go ahead and clone it and just reverse engineer and just go over what they made, see how they group things, see how they did their texturing, how they put groups together, all those different things. So if you want to learn different styles and things like that, feel free to look for people's work, reverse engineer. Just know that any map that you clone on the explore page is, of course, belongs to that user, and you can't use it for commercial use. It's only for personal use, all right? Of course, unless you've asked that user and you've gone to some kind of non-disclosure or some kind of agreement with that user, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and save. And I'm not going to do any kind of Q&A because I realized there was just so many questions. Last time I couldn't keep up with them. So I would encourage people that if you have a ton of questions, if they didn't get answered by our mods, though we have the best mods out there, so I highly doubt it. But if you didn't get any of your, if you have some yearning questions that you want to ask, I would absolutely direct you to our Discord server. In that Discord server, when you first show up, Cheryl will provide the link in the chat. When you first show up, make sure that you go to the roles channel, click the Inkarnator role, and that will allow you to see all the channels that are in the server. So definitely click that Inkarnator role and feel free to come join us. We can go into a stream chat or we can go to some discussion, whatever, in the Discord, and I can answer any questions that you might have. I'm always willing to answer questions. It might be just a little bit easier on Discord than trying to do it live here in the stream. So it does seem like people do like this series, so most likely I will fit in Fantasy World Biomes Part 2 in next month. I do hope that the time change is working for people. We went from 10 a.m. PST to 3 a.m. PST. I hope that a lot of people on the East Coast, United States, have kind of kicked off their shoes, got off work, and have been able to enjoy the stream with us. Absolutely. Do you guys group things? Absolutely. Let me just tell you something. There is a lot of groups. Now, I want to also say, Frostberry, that if you didn't know, go check our YouTube channel, and you'll notice that there is a stream called Understanding Groups. Go check that out. If you're confused on how groups work, what they are, go check out that stream. We had that last week. I would totally recommend that you go watch that to kind of help you to understand how groups operate. I think in the next stream, if we do this again, we'll probably end up doing savannas, deciduous forests, maybe even deal with the evil land. There's some really nice red mountains in there. We can probably apply them there, as well as maybe build some swamps and maybe even some jungle, because it's always nice to have those, right? All right. Well, hey, the stream was great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I hope that you appreciated the stream, that it helped you to kind of understand how biomes operated. If there's information that you know about biomes in the next stream that I don't, feel free to share them. You know, learning is a collective experience. So if you have information about biomes and how they operate, feel free to share them because I am all ears and I absolutely love learning from our community. We got a lot of super smart people in our community, so I'm always willing to listen and learn from you all, okay? It's a mutual experience in the learning process, trust me. You're not the only ones learning in these streams, all right? Okay, well, hey, thank you so much again for joining me. This stream will be uploaded to YouTube probably within the next hour or two, so look for that if you missed it. And I will all see you next time. That's going to be next Wednesday on the 21st, and that's going to be how to create your own map style, because some of you might be private contractors, you're trying to bring home the bacon, and you want to make a map that pops out from other users, right? And that way you can make sure that you get a lot of clientele. So that's what that next stream is going to be about. Don't forget, Wednesday, 21st, 3 p.m. PST. Well, hey, I am headed out, so please, all of you, take care, merry map making, and please stay safe and healthy, okay? Auf Wiedersehen, my friends.